cloud, AWS, Terraform, DevOps. When you hear these words, you get excited. You get excited to know how these things are getting done with few steps only. You approach your DevOps team to get your infrastructure done. You approach your responsibility engineering team to get the server deployed, and many things. In today's era, everything is automated. So why we shouldn't start with us? Welcome back to my channel. In today's lecture, we are going to talk about on the automation part. And with the help of Terraform and AWS, we'll see how the things can quickly be created in terms of infrastructure, in terms of automation, in terms of DevOps. If you are new to my channel, welcome back. Please do subscribe to my channel for the more interesting videos coming further. First thing first, this Terraform series has been started since a while, and we had talked about few basics of Terraform. So let's get a quick recap on those chapters now. In few previous lectures, we have seen how you can provision your Terraform workspaces, how you can manage your outputs, your locals variable, how can you provide settings to the Terraform using Terraform block, how you can use the backend using local and remote. We have talked about the data sources, and we created few workspaces using Terraform script. If you haven't watched my previous videos, I have given the link to the I button. Please go and watch, because this will be very helpful to understand the basic of Terraform. If you're new to my channel and you are unaware with the AWS, don't be worried. We are going to talk everything in detail from today onwards. First, we will cover the part of AWS which will help you to clear your certification as well, to understand the AWS services in more better way. And then after the introduction part of the AWS services, we will jump on the lab section. So let's get your hands dirty now. AWS, cloud, reason, we heard so many terms. So before jumping on the lab session or in more detail, we need to understand these terms. What is it about? So in AWS is everything is about region, availability zone, edge locations. So let's talk about this part. When we say AWS cloud provider is having a region, having a partition. So basically AWS has categorized its region into three partitions. First, AWS standard. Second one, AWS China, and third one is specifically for US government, which is called AWS US government. Region is a group of region, and the region is a physical location around the world where data centers are grouped. So in the AWS, the regions are defined having a cluster of data center, and AWS has categorized these regions into four part or four categories basically: North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa as a third one, and the last one we have Asia. So AWS tries to cover as much as possible to cover all around the world. What is availability zone? Availability zone is one or more individual data center with redundant power, networking, and connectivity in a region. And region is a physical location where we will have a cluster of data centers, as we talked. It empowers the customer to operate their application with scalability, fault tolerance available, and highly available. So a region, a physical location can have multiple availability zone interconnected with a high bandwidth, low latency networking to provide you better user experience, high availability, and to deal with the disaster recovery situation. All traffic between edges is encrypted. So what is AZ basically? When we talk about let's try to imagine AZ. One AZ is physically separated from other by miles, like 60 miles, 70 miles or 100 kilometers. So it is a kind of a operational center or physical location where all the computing systems are placed. The next term comes into the AWS is edge location. It is similar to the availability zone, but it is used to caching of the data to provide better user experience. When you try to search or explore any website or try to hit any website, you get some website response very faster and some response little late. So in terms of edge location, the website is cached as nearer to the user location. The content of website is cached to closer to the user proximity, geographical proximity. So you can get a better user experience in terms of when you try to visit or search any website. While edges are used to host the server, application and databases. So if we try to categorize, we have a web application and we have API server. So we can use the edge location to optimize the behavior or optimize the user experience for our web application, while edges can be used to host your server, API server or databases or the application part. As I said, edge location is used for caching of data, so it always sit closer to the user location, closer to the region basically. It sits together to the region, so it can provide you better experience. So we have categorized into the four category, four region: North America, South America, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and last one was Asia one. So whenever, let's say from India, if you try to visit some site, so AWS determined what is your nearest edge location and it try to cache the data and it provides you in the faster way. That we can talk about in more detail later, how this edge location works, how the performance is getting optimized, how you get the good user experience when you use the edge location. Local zone. It is an extension to the AWS region which can be used to run latency sensitive application closer to the user location. For example, if you have designed a real-time gaming application or a media or entertainment based some content and you want to have a very ultra latency, you cannot afford the more latency, you want your application is latency sensitive, in those terms you can have a local zone. That local zone is like for the selected AWS services, you can have all the setups together. The region and AZ overview in North and South America. Basically, in these regions are having availability zones. So a physical location can have multiple data centers with it. And as I said, edge location always sits with the region because it is very similar to the AZ. So always sit with the region. So in Northern Virginia region, we have 6 availability zones. It was launched in 2006. It has local zones number as 8 and the local zones was launched in 2020. Similarly for Ohio, 3 availability zone and it got launched in 2016. Oregon we talk about 4 availability zone and local zones is 3. Northern California we have a 3 availability zones. South America we have 3 availability zones. For if you talk about the government partition, we have a government cloud US West region, 3 availability zones, US East region, 3 availability zones, and the central region with the 3 availability zones. If you talk about Europe, Africa, and Middle East, we have a here is 3 availability zones, Bahrain 3 availability zones, Ireland 3 availability zones, Milan 3 availability zones, and similarly for Asia, we have a mainland China 3 availability zones, Sydney 3 availability zones, Tokyo 4 availability zones. Likewise, we have Osaka 3 availability zones, Asia Pacific we have 3 availability zones, Hong Kong 3 availability zones. So you are from India or some other country, you know which regions you belong, always try to sit together to your region for a better user experience. Okay, so we understand what is these terms, what is the reason is about, what is availability zones, edge location and partition, because these terms are going to be heavily used in each and every services. The first services we are starting with the storage services and the simple storage service, which is called as S3. So start with this series. I have already created my account to demonstrate all the lab session there. As in the previous chapter we have seen, I have taken the Terraform Cloud Enterprises applications, or basically I have registered myself in Terraform Cloud Enterprise to demonstrate all the lab session over there. And we also have seen that we created few workspaces. So first let's go back to the AWS Management Console and we will see it from there. If you look at the AWS Management Console, this is how it looks like when initially you load up, and these are the all services listed there. So first question comes into the AWS certification, or somewhere you are going to appear into the certification. Then the first thing comes into what kind of services we have. They never ask you about the in detail, but you should know about the categories. If I talk about S3, then it comes under the storage. If I talk about Route 53, then it comes about the networking. If I talk about the CloudFront and VPC, then it should come onto the content delivery part. So you should aware of which category you belong and which services you are talking about. So category and the services linking you must be aware of. So we are going to talk about this storage S3 basically, and we will do all the coding, all the lab practice here in S3 today. To start with the S3, we should know about what is storage. Storage basically a container where you store some kind of a data or file or metadata. So in similar way in AWS, it provides us infrastructure to store your object or file into the cloud. It can be used to store, protect and retrieve the object file at any point of time. Whenever required, you can easily access it and can be used as an additional storage system, like we do for file system in our operating system. Similarly, you can think about the storage system you have on cloud, and you can use it as an additional storage system. What is bucket? So bucket is container which is used to store your objects within it, a reserved amount of memory which can hold a single or multiple objects together. It also helps to organize the namespace at the top level. It identifies the account responsible for storage and data storage. And it is not limited here. It provides you the access control like bucket policy, access control list on the object, on the bucket itself, and S3 access point to deal with other services. Things to remember here. By default, when you create your account, you are only limited for 100 buckets, but the 100 buckets can be created in a single account, and at most 1000 bucket can be requested free of cost. S3 or any other services are mostly region specific. So the question comes into mind, is S3 region specific? Yes. Buckets always created in a specific region, but they are spanned globally. What it means is, let's look back at the partition section that we talked about earlier. We have three type of partition: AWS standard, the China one, and the US government. So by default we are using AWS standard. What does it mean is, it will be spanning across the AWS standard partition. So whenever you create your bucket, it will be available, or it will be spanned across the AWS standard partition. As you said, this is a container, then there are definitely a kind of a naming convention we must follow. So what is the naming convention we use for bucket? It must be between 3 to 63 cats. Name must match this pattern, like alphanumeric with a special character like dot or hyphen. but this must start and end with only alphanumeric. You cannot have dot or hyphen starting and ending in your bucket name. Hyphen should be used when you are using your S3 bucket for static hosting, and dot should be avoided. Reason being, it is not very friendly to do the certification or linking with the SSL certification in virtual host when you do static hosting. So it is recommended you always do hyphen based naming for your bucket if you are willing to store your static content there or you want to host your static website there. There are things to remember. Bucket must not have prefix like xn or suffix like s3 alias. Bucket must not have the IP address format as a name. Bucket name must be unique within the partition that we talked about, like AWS standard partition. Once created, there is no way to update your bucket name and reason. So the only way is to delete it and recreate it. The next topic is bucket properties. When this is a container, there definitely certain property has there's certain option to associate certain properties with it. So there are few properties that we can deal with, and the properties are bucket version. You can enable and disable the versioning for the disaster recovery for the highly availability part. Tags, you can associate it. You can associate tags to your bucket if you want to have a billing dashboard, or you want to identify how much cost for bucket is getting generated. You can use a tags. It is basically to categorize something or to basically filter out some data based on your requirement. We have encryption. So before uploading to your bucket, everything will be encrypted using server key. There's a different mechanism, but we will see into the separate chapter how to deal with this encryption process. And if it is enabled, if you try to download it, it will be decrypt automatically. You can use this S3 bucket and even enable the properties to have to store server access log without paying a single cost. The cost for S3 bucket is only the data you transfer from here to there or the amount of data you store within it. I'll give the link where you can read about, you can calculate the charges about the S3 bucket pricing. You can also enable the event logging using CloudTrail, but there's an additional charge. You have to pay for it. There's an event notification mechanism. If something happened to your bucket, you can use this event notification API to deal with it. You can enable the properties of transfer acceleration. You can log the object within it. You can have a requester pay part, and at last and the most popular topic, like you can use it for the static website hosting. Transfer acceleration is very useful when you are daily dealing with TB, GB kind of a data and you are not using your bandwidth and you want to accelerate that process. Then you can use this property, or basically you can use this service to accelerate your upload and download to the S3 bucket. Thing is, what is an object? An object is a blueprint of a class. This is the coding style that we know. But here in AWS, an object can be a file or a metadata that describe that file. AWS uses key value structure to store multiple objects within a bucket. But an object can have a maximum size of 5 terabyte. A single object can have a size of 5 terabyte. The question comes into the mind, can we have a nested bucket? Can we have a bucket inside a bucket? No. Bucket are a namespaces which is useful to identify at the top level that we have seen it. Object comes with some properties that you can use: the key, value, metadata, and ACL, access control list. Key is the unique identifier to identify your object, the value which we will store there as a part of object, and the metadata is going to describe about your file or your object. Maybe content type, it is a MIME type of image, or it is a kind of a audio file, it could be a kind of a video file or anything. So these kind of a metadata which will be used to identify your object. The ACL part is to put some restriction on the object label. We have a ACL on the bucket label as well as we have ACL on the object label. Amazon S3 offers a range of storage classes based on your requirement, based on the different use cases. The first one is S3 standard storage class. This is kind of a general purpose storage class or general purpose frequently accessed data where, for example, you can use it for content delivery, maybe media or your dynamic websites or static website, or any application that you use to access it frequently with the highly throughput and low latency. But you can migrate from standard storage class to other storage class using lifecycle event or using lifecycle policy. While we talk about intelligent tiering, when you are unsure about your data availability or what kind of storage you require, then in that case you can go for S3 intelligence tiering with the pattern is unknown to you. In this case, this storage class offer and decide based on your pattern whether it should be standard one or infrequently accessed one. So if AW itself identify based on your access pattern where to keep the data into the standard bucket, standard storage class, or it has to be migrated to the different storage class if it is not frequently accessed. The third one is standard infrequently access. This storage class can be useful when you want to keep the copy of data, but that is little infrequent in terms of accessing the data, and all the storage class comes with highly throughput like almost 99% time uptime for the given year. Other IA can be used for the long-lived data with the infrequent accesses. You want to keep some backup. This storage class can be useful for disaster recovery, which can be set together, or the file can store there for a longer time, but it will be required when actually it is needed. The difference between one zone and the standard IA is like standard IA are at least span to 3 availability zones in given region, while one zone is only specific to the single availability zone. So there's a one downside. In event of availability zone destruction, your data will be lost. Your data will be lost in case of one zone IA storage class. If you talk about Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive, these are used to store your data as a backup, which will be stored for a years and many years, and it is not frequently required. So Glacier one is to store your backup, which can be accessed within few minutes to few hours, and it is used as a backup storage system. So this is secure, durable, and low cost storage class for data archiving part, data archiving thing. You can reliably store any amount of data at cost that are competitive with or cheaper than your any other storage system, and you can access the data within few minutes to few hours. Glacier Deep Archive is a kind of one advanced thing in the archiving pattern. If you want to keep your data for longer years, and basically it is useful for the highly regulatory industries like health department or financial department or public sector, where they want to maintain their backups for digital pattern for long years to meet their compliance regulatories or to meet their compliance requirements. They keep to store their digital records over there, and the data retrieval can be done within 12 hours. You can migrate from standard to intelligent tiering to standard IA to one zone using lifecycle policy. But in the Glacier and the Glacier Deep Archive, you can directly use the S3 API to put directly into the Glacier storage class, or you can easily use the lifecycle policies to migrate from one storage class to another storage class without making any change to your existing application. If all above six are not fit into your requirement, then you can go with Outpost, which will store the data at your on-premises AWS Outpost. This is one advanced topic. I think it is not needed as of now to understand, because we are only going to talk about above six, so we will be focusing towards these six. But if you need to understand what is Outpost, please do write me into the comment. I will answer your question, or probably I'll create one separate topic on it. So what are the things to be remembered? If you're the person who are trying to clear their certification, the question generally comes up: what is the best way to manage the disaster recovery? It is always too good to have two availabilities and span into three different regions instead of having two regions with three availability zones. Six availability zones and three regions. How would you identify, or how would you distribute these to meet the disaster recovery? So it is always good to have two availability zone in three different regions instead of having two regions with three availability zones. So we have a six availability zones and but three regions. So in case of any restriction to the single region, we can use another region. It is very rare that your entire region is disrupted. So it always you span into the multiple region to meet your disaster recovery thing. This is all for this lecture. Thanks for your time. Have a great day ahead.